Okay,
Let's
now then the official hi everybody, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I see that you all can hear us, so we'll move on. Thank you. We have a good interest from the Mendix community with a lot of participants. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to put any questions in the Q&A. There's a Q&A section in Zoom, or you can put something in the chat. We will be talking today about quality in the Mendix community, taking full control of your development cycle. I'm the director of the quality tooling suite at CLEVR, and I'm joined today by Michael Zwarte, and Michael is our executive sales executive at CLEVR. So what are we going to be talking about is how to develop at speed while maintaining reliability, security, and performance. And Michael has close to 10 years experience in sales around low code and around Mendix. So he, as no other, understands how easy it is to adopt it, but then when you scale, how hard it is to take full control. So Michael, can you take it away with how people will understand if their app actually is great, and building an app fast is one thing, but building it with confidence is quite another.
Yes. Well, thank you, Tanya, and on my behalf as well, welcome everybody to this webinar. And what I would like to do for today is to take you briefly through some of the developments that we see in the low-code market, and where we believe well, there is a gap that you need to be aware of regarding being in control of your development cycles. So what I will do is I will give you a high-level overview of the app development challenges that we see, and from there on I'll take a further deep dive into the analysis and solutions on how you can control or solve this. So if we take a look at this slide, build great apps fast. Yeah, this is what Mendix presents to all of us. It's these type of messages, build great apps fast, which is true. And analyst firms like Gartner and Forrester, they also underwrite this. I think recently also Forrester stated that all enterprises who use low code admit a 100% positive ROI right now. So if you take a closer look at this message from build great apps fast, then we see that in this case, it's all about great and fast, but there are three underlying core values when it comes to building apps that Mendix is presenting. And it's about the core principles of speed, collaboration, and control. Well, regarding speed, yeah, you build apps way faster compared to high code if you use Mendix. No question about it. Collaboration, well, business is more involved in the development process because you closely work with the business in developing an application. So Mendix is definitely bridging the gap there between business and IT. But what about control? Is Mendix in control? Well, I believe they are, because on a lot of elements in the platform, they are controlling that you build apps and can maintain it correctly. But if you look at it from a platform perspective, is the platform secure? It's definitely secure. They do extensive pen tests. They've got lots of certifications. So they're in control of a lot of elements on the platform. But what about the details of your application? If you take a closer look at that. Because if you take a closer look at the statement, how do you know that your app is actually great? And we have, yeah, here at CLEVR have been asked this question multiple times. And well, if we take a little bit of a deep dive into the app and how it's being developed, then there might be some challenges on the horizon that you, according to us, should be aware of. So some questions to be asked. Are you confident enough that you can release your application on time? And when you release your application and you go to production, does it perform as you envision or maybe better? How easy is it to maintain your application? And what about security? Is your app completely secure? So the funny thing about this is that we were preparing for this webinar last week when an article on Wired was published that we would like to highlight here, maybe to set an example or to further inform you about it. Because what happened last week is that Wired published a massive security breach where over 1,000 web apps with, well, more than 38 million records were exposed. And this happened to, not to Mendix in this case, but it's just for the example, and we don't want to name and shame, but it's about, well, from another alternative low-code platform from a major vendor, where many types of data were exposed, including personal information like COVID vaccination appointments, social security numbers, employee IDs, names, email addresses. In total, I think it were 47 different entities that were exposed. And the organizations that were exposed range from governmental bodies like New York City or airlines as American Airlines. So the organization that exposed this vulnerability, they went on to further investigate the platform. And what they found out that in the product documentation regarding this case, and it was about, I believe it was a no data connection, that actually the documentation exactly described what happened if an app was configured in a specific way. So yeah, they found out it was actually more a configuration issue. And although some of the risks were described in documentation, it was clearly not sufficient to avoid the serious consequences of misconfiguring the OData connection in this case for these portals. So what they did, they filed a security report with the vendor. And the response was, after some back and forth communication, yeah, we're going to close this case because this behavior is considered to be by design. So, which technically is true. If you have designed it like this and you documented it, it is true. But of course, if you are developing on a local platform like Mendix, you want to at least be aware of the importance of configuring your app. And then, yeah, the devil is in the detail. So we believe that this is a perfect example of what we were just mentioning, that how in control of your application are you actually, and are you aware of all the vulnerabilities that there are out there in an application. And in this case, I would like to make a short comparison with this mountain climber. So yeah, what do we see here, or what do you see? Is this mountain climber strong? Well, I would say he is. Do you think he will make it to the top? He probably will. But if he needs to beat certain times, or he needs to be there at once, how many mistakes can you make? And it's, yeah, it's like you can compare this with the pressure that's on dev teams today, where regarding time and being in control and making no mistakes, yeah, you need to make it to the top at once. But there are still many errors out there when it comes to building applications that happen. So when we analyze what happened to what Wired published, that could be a unique incident. However, studies show that, well, lots of errors still go undetected and might have huge consequences. So it's not a unique situation that that Wired exposed. And the numbers are, well, mind-boggling. So there was a study published amongst 1,000 developers earlier this year that revealed that errors are detected in many different ways, but in most cases when the apps are in production. So those developers, when they investigated it, 1 in 4 say that they detect errors only when someone complains. 2 out of 3 of the developers have discovered errors through in-app reports. 1 in 4 found out about an error through social media. And 1 in 5 even heard about it directly from their CEO. Yeah, whoops. So how does that impact the business? Well, I think there are, according to those developers, two major categories. So releases are derailed and it suffers innovation. That's what the developers say about it. And on the release side, well, 26% of the respondents say that their team is being held back from deploying more often. And another 26% say fixing errors slows them down and keeps them from sticking to the production schedule. And regarding innovation, 32% of developers are spending up to 10 hours a week fixing bugs instead of writing code. And even 55% say that they would build new features and functionalities if they weren't fixing bugs. So yeah, this is not only bad for business, but it also has implications for the developers themselves. So let's take a closer look at how it affects them. And this is what developers have to say about how it affects them on a personal level. So nearly 1/3 of the developers say manually responding to errors makes them feel frustrated. 22% say losing time and focus on errors makes them feel overwhelmed. 17% say it makes them feel burned out. And 12% makes them feel what makes them resentful. And nearly 1 in 10 developers say dealing with bugs makes them even want to quit their jobs. So yeah, like it all states there, we all know that attracting developers comes at a high cost of sourcing, onboarding, and training. So if 1 in 10 makes them want to leave, well, then it's a costly threat. So how can this be solved, according to the developers? Well, 86% of the developers say that they need better tools to detect and fix errors so that they can iterate faster. And here's what developers said about how to boost the productivity and efficiency using the tools. So 47% said they are spending time searching in logs to find the source of an error. And for this, they want tools that speed up to tackle the errors. 34% want more real-time insights, such as 1-minute snapshots and error rate charts. And 33% ask for more contextual information regarding the specific violation. And the last one is also 1/3. They want to increase the quality assurance without losing valuable time. So if tools are out there that can help them in that perspective, then it would make their life easier and they would feel less frustrated. So how can CLEVR solve this, or how can CLEVR support you in this process? So the devil, as I said already, is in the detail, and a minor setting might have major consequences for your application. And for that reason, we have built a set of Mendix tools. So it's Mendix specific that we've built these tools for, that help you prevent getting these issues or minimize the risks here. So we at CLEVR built the CLEVR Dev Suite, and it contains a number of tools such as APD, which is a performance diagnostics tool when your application is in production and live. But we also built a code reviewer, which is called ACR. And that's a tool that you can use during the development of your application. And what I would like to do now is just take you to a brief, short demo of that tool to highlight on how it can help you as well to make sure that you know what you're doing and what kind of settings or how to configure your app perfectly. So let me open up the screen, and I assume you can still see it. Tanya, thumbs up if you can still see it. Yeah, okay. So if we go, maybe one step back from, well, our dev suite, if you go to the application code reviewer, because here are some other tools that we provide as well. Then what we see over here is that we have the central screen of ACR. And this is connected to Mendix as well, so to the team server and Sprinter where all your settings are arranged. So in order for a developer to use ACR, you need to have access to the application itself, and you need to have a license to use ACR. And in that combination, ACR will show you all the applications in this screen that you can review within the application code reviewer. And in this case, I only have access to Mendix World Demo, which is a demonstration app. So that's the only application that I can review. Oh, sorry, I moved over a little bit too far to the corner, which is my automatic screensaver. But if I click on the application, it will now load. And what ACR actually does, it's a tool that scans your application against, well, more than 160 best practices that we've built into the tool. Those best practices come from our own consultants, but also from Mendix and other people that make us aware of best practice that you need to follow within the low-code world when you're using Mendix. And actually what it does is if you scan your application, it highlights how well your app is behaving against those best practices and where violations occur. And here we follow also the ISO 25010 certification schedule for software development. So what we see over here is the central screen where we are reviewing, in this case, the Mendix demo app, and we were reviewing revision 177. Here in the middle, you see a snapshot of how well your application is performing against those best practices. And you see some trend lines in violations compared to the past. And you see, well, from the latest upgrade that we did, it's really, well, we've got some work to do on our side here as well. So we see an increase in violations, but you could also see app growth and encapsulation. But first, maybe, yeah, we are looking at revision 177. But how would that work? So you can, if you go to the revision settings, you can actually upload your own revision and start reviewing this. And you can also compare it to the past ones, or even open up previous revisions that you've done on your application. So if you are committing your application, then you can download and review your latest commit from your application. Or if you're working in a broader team, you can review the last 5 commits as well. And you can also choose if you want to review the main line or a demo branch, or whatever you would like to upload here, yeah, to make it work for what you would like to review. But in this case, I would like to stick with this revision 177. And on the left, I get an overview here based on specific categories regarding security, reliability, performance, architecture, maintainability, and project hygiene. I can also go to this if I click on it on the left side through the violations part, because here we will get an overview of all the violations in the application. And for now, I would like to focus on the blocker and the criticals that we have. So in the template that we offer, and you can change the template yourself, but according to us, these are, well, blockers, or at least critical best practices that you're violating in the application that you should review. And it's a long list right now, and well, it might come across a little bit overwhelming, but if you just go through it, you better understand it pretty quickly. But let's take a closer look at one of those violations that's in here. So for example, we see here, commits should take place outside of a loop. And if you click on it, you see a list on where, according to ACR, you're violating this best practice. And what you could be doing here is just copy and paste it and go into Mendix Studio Pro and start changing it. But if you would like to understand, well, what does it mean a commit should take place outside of a loop? Then you can also go to the rule setting and get a more insight in the documentation regarding this. So if you just click on read documentation, then we've documented all our best practices, and it further explains on, well, this is what, according to us, has been built in your application and how you should do it to be compliant according to the best practice. And in this case, a commit should always take place outside of a loop. And well, I'm not that technical, but for the developers, they immediately understand it. Yeah, there are also per setting some, or per rule, some settings that you can change. But well, I think we can talk about it further on if you're more interested to learn about it. Yeah, there are some rule settings and app settings, so you can create your own template. And next to all the violations that you can go through and work on, we are also comparing or providing insights on how well your modules are behaving. The Mendix widget, so if you're using App Store component, one of the challenges that we also hear is that it's a struggle to understand, okay, am I on the latest, or am I using the latest App Store components in my application? And we provide insight there as well. And recently we also started scanning Java dependencies. So we are providing further insights there as well. So that's in short a brief introduction to ACR and how it can help you. And if I go back to the slides right now, let me see if I can start the presentation again.
Michael?
Yes.
We have a question, and I'm not sure if we can answer it, but I'll just ask you, and if not, we'll put it in writing. Is it possible to use ACR even before commit? Since commit might be a little too late, one may not want to commit before fixing these issues.
Yeah, and well, we get the application, or we derive it from once it goes into the team server. So then you need to commit the application, but it could still be that it's in a test or acceptance environment when you are reviewing it. But you need to do a commit for us to be able to show you what you're doing. And if you're just developing on Studio Pro, it's difficult to get the information back. But I think we should just describe this or note this question down and then get back to the people who are attending this webinar in an email with further explaining and how it exactly works.
Okay, we'll do that. Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
I hope this answers your question for now.
Yeah, maybe not completely, but well, it's a little bit more technical, and I would just, yeah, if we put it in writing, then maybe it's a better way of answering it completely. Yeah, just a couple of highlights. So what does it mean if you have over 160 best practices in ACR? So one example here is best practices where a constant, which is a type of data that during the usage of the app will not change, should not be exposed to the client. It sounds like a pretty simple rule, but what it actually means is that during the development, if a developer adds a constant to an application, and in this example it is a password key, then the app should be configured with no exposure of this data to the client. However, it's just a setting in your application, so you are not really aware of the damage that it could bring to your application. So it's a setting in your application, and ACR highlights where you are exposing constants to a client so that you at least are aware of it. And one of the things that I didn't show you a minute ago in the application, if, for example, you would, with the development team, decide that we want to expose this information to the client, so it's not really a violation, then there's also an allow list where you can allow these violations to happen within ACR and agree on that. So, but at least you are made aware of it. Another highlight here with regarding the security, it's entity access default rights for new members should be none or read. So when developing an application, quite often developers, they put the member on read and write the rights, as it makes it easier during the development and testing the application. However, when in production, in most cases, the default rights for new members should be none or read to avoid data being exposed or changed. And this is overlooked quite a lot because it's quite easy to step over it, as it is another setting. But yeah, when moving the app to production, the security breach can be massive. So with a small setting, it might have a huge consequence. And another last example, but that's regarding performance in this case. This best practice prevents deadlocks within your application. It's a bit technical, but if a microflow where the logic is configured is waiting for certain data from a resource, which assigns it to another microflow, which is waiting for also another resource, then, well, it's a loop where nothing will happen and it will provide you with a performance issue. So it can affect the performance massively. And I think one example that we have here is just before summer, it was a client who had a performance issue where two developers had searched over 3 hours and they couldn't find what was causing the performance issue in their application, let alone solve it. So one of our consultants who was also working on that project, he said, well, have you tried ACR? And it showed that they were violating this deadlock rule, and it immediately pointed out, where they should be going or search in Studio Pro to solve it. So it saves time on one hand for your developer, and it also keeps users happy because the app is performing well. And one element that we haven't mentioned here is it also speeds up the learning curve for your developers because you become a better developer and learn more about the Mendix platform. So those were just 3 examples out of the 160 best practices. And to close this off, I would like to come back to the mountain climber that we used earlier. And if we compare the mountain climber in using Mendix, well, the platform is strong, and we truly believe that you all will build apps and great apps fast. But there are just some elements when you're reaching the top in a really fast-moving environment that you need to be aware of some challenges. And well, we at CLEVR believe that we are the organization that can help you pinpoint out what's the best way moving forward without making any mistakes. And well, with that, I would like to thank you all for your time. And maybe if we have time, Tanja, we can answer some additional questions. But that was my story for today.
Thank you, Michael. That was a really clear presentation. Yeah, we have some questions. So you were talking about the CLEVR Dev Suite in the beginning. So apparently there are a couple of tools in this development suite. Can you explain what these tools are? Are they specifically for the developers? So which tools are in the CLEVR development suite?
Yeah, so it's a development suite designed to help the developers. And well, we've seen ACR, which is actually, if you're building an application, it really supports you as a developer. But we also have, it might of course still occur that there's a performance issue in an application while it's in production. Then we have an application performance diagnostics tool. So it immediately highlights what is causing the performance issue, and it really drills down into the details of the microflow, for example, where you need to search for optimizing this. And next to this, within ACR, we have built 2 new tools which are in preview mode currently, which is application model security. And it's kind of like what Wired also exposed. It will expose you as a developer on what kind of data is exposed that you are not aware of. So that's, I think, well, in short, what that does. We've introduced a CI/CD tool for Mendix. So if you're testing the application, or if it's not moving through ACR correctly, then within CI/CD it won't deploy the application. And we also have a test suite, so for functional testing.
So thank you, Michael. Then we have another question. You specifically talk about Mendix, and you showed the Mendix best practices. Do you also cover other low-code platforms? Some of the teams, they work with more low-code platforms than just Mendix. Do the tools cover other platforms? No,
so we at CLEVR are 100% focused on Mendix. So all our tools are also built for Mendix, and we also actually build them in Mendix. So what we just saw on ACR is also an application that is built on Mendix, and it's I think a challenging application to build and maintain. And maybe that's also interesting to share that the product owner, Darren Zwart, is presenting about this ACR application next week during Mendix World, but more than from a development perspective on how would you build and maintain that. But no, the answer is, it's specifically only for Mendix.
And that's what makes it so strong, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we have 2 more technical questions. Do the tools work with all the versions of Mendix, or do they need to be upgraded constantly?
Well, the tools work with the latest version of Mendix, and we go back, I think, right now to Mendix 6. So yeah, at some point, but there you will be informed if you're using the tools. You need to upgrade your applications to the newest version. But that's, well, if you only are not upgrading at all in a couple of years, that's when it might become something to be aware of, to say it like that. So if it goes further back, I think Mendix 4 and 5, then it's not supported, but after that as well.
And let's hope people are not on those versions anymore, right?
No, yeah, that's true. And I'm not sure if it's 6 or, but maybe it's also good to note it down and put it in writing in the follow-up email with the other question.
Yeah. I have one last technical question. For all the participants, we will be putting all the answers in a Q&A report, and we will be sending the recording and the Q&A report after this session, so somewhere in the next couple of days. But we have one last technical question that I have no idea if we can answer it, but otherwise we'll ask our product manager to answer it in the Q&A. How do you define new users? A new created login with certain role like manager might still need access. I'm not sure what this question is about.
Yeah, so at first somebody needs to have access to the application on Mendix. So that's being managed on the Mendix side. And for ACR, yeah, you can buy a license, and within that license you have a number of users, and you can provide access for one of those users. And if a manager is a user, then he should have access as a user within ACR as well. So there is a license structure available in how to set it up for the people who will have access to ACR in this case.
This is a question related to best practices. That's what the participant is saying. I think because you have more questions, I don't want to spell out your name, we can get you in touch with our product manager to ask your questions directly. I think that's a good idea because I have a feeling you have more technical questions.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at the time. I'm not sure. I think it was half an hour, and
yeah. Okay, so what we'll do is we will send out the QA report and the recording. I'll get the person with all the technical questions in contact with our product manager, Darren. And then I want to conclude the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found it useful and that it met your expectations. We hope to see you in one of the other webinars soon, and have a great day. And thank you, Michael, for this presentation.
thank you as well on my behalf.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.